you so. Hello?
Yes, it works.
Thank you so much, Carlos. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. For the last session of the conference, I have asked Carlos's permission. We have talked a lot about intergenerational dialogue, and then this morning, my collaborator and colleague Yaki sent me a dialogue that she had with her 6-year-old daughter last night. And she found it quite illuminating. She actually couldn't sleep thinking about this. So just thought I would share it with everyone as a bit of our closing because it's very timely. Someone must have been sending the signal out there so that children are responding. So my friend asked her daughter Romy, who's 6 years old, why are we on this planet? Why are we born? And she said, because once people die, there will be nobody. And she asks her, why does the planet need people? And Rami says, because the planet needs people to look after it. If people don't look after it, the planet will not survive. And then Yaki asks, but other planets have no people on them and they're fine, like Mercury and Mars. And then Rami says, but Earth has life and gives life. Like some animals and plants, they help each other out like friends. Earth and human help each other. If everything on the planet goes away, there will be no life. And then the planet goes away too, because Earth has life. So I think even when I was growing up, I heard that Earth doesn't need humans, that even if we go away, Earth will be fine. But I think we have the younger generation who are saying that Earth needs humanity as much as we need Earth. So I think, we do have wise beings coming back as youngsters as well. And I'm sure that in this last session, we will continue to illuminate on this conversation of Earth-humanity connection, co-flourishing, reconciliation. So I'll pass it back to Carlos.
Beautiful, Song Xiao, many thanks. I'm particularly pleased with the conference. Again, deep gratitude to our hosts who made this possible. People, I think, are very excited. There are many, many rich and fruitful conversations going on, which is a good outcome of the conference itself. And now, for the Club of Rome, this is a very special moment. As I said, this is an historical moment in itself because this is the first event, the first conference of the Club of Rome, organized, gently organized and supported by our hosts of the Shanghai University of Engineering Sciences and the city of Suzhou. But the first time ever that the Club of Rome organizes a conference in China. So this is historical for the Club of Rome. Thank you. And now we will have the perfect moment to leave also an historical moment because we have one of our heroes in the room, co-author of the Limits to Growth, our dear friend, colleague, Jorgen Randers, who has spent his life across, and that I particularly like, 1/3 of his life in academia. He has been president of the BI Norwegian Business School, among other things, trained as a physicist, by the way, and 1/3 of his life in business, 1/3 in NGOs, and we could continue because I think your life is more than 3/3. You have so many dimensions, and quite obviously, he has a long history with the Club of Rome, being one of the co-authors when he was a young man of the Limits to Growth, the report which made us famous and still keeps our reputation high. So he knows, I think, everything about the Club of Rome and its 50 years of history. And at the same time, whatever your passport says about the number of years that you have been with us on Earth, I feel, Jorgen, this is the moment to say youth is a state of mind. No, I told you the day before yesterday. I told you, oh my God, you are in such a good shape, which we confirmed these days in the conversations we had. So let's give a good applause to this young man who will now give us a lecture, a keynote. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. I am, of course, flattered by Carlos' kind introduction. He forgot the most important thing. I'm not only old, I'm also a depressed person, however, with a smiling face, because I've learned from 50 years fighting for a sustainable world that this is difficult, but you do not get anywhere unless you smile. So I have this artificial thing on my face all the time, which helps my otherwise saddened mind. And the reason why I'm depressed is, of course, that I've been fighting the good fight now for such a long time without very much success, that it's starting to wear even on my patients. I've learned from long experience and from my wife that it really does not help to be depressed, and that you should give hope. And that's the only thing I'm here to do today. I'm going to give you an update from the front line 55 years after I entered the front line, a global perspective on what is actually happening. For those of you who like slides, look at them. For those who do not like slides, just listen to what I say. The slides are available somewhere, and there are many, many more slides than the ones I'm going to talk about. So the first thing I have to do, luckily I have half an hour, and experience is that you need these first 10 minutes simply in order to make you change your mind, you know, to start looking at the world in the proper perspective. And the way I do this normally is by just showing this slide. You know, you should not think about next week, next month, next year, next business cycle. Please think about the world from 1980. So we have some history here, and to the year 2100. This is the perspective of the limits to growth. And the Earth for All book that came out 3 years ago, something like this, is the update 50 years after we started the process. And we still use, you know, quantitative graphical representations in order to try to lengthen the time perspective, you know, of people, so that start looking at the real underlying issues instead of looking at the political fluff and the economic noise and the emotional problems on the surface. We're now talking about long-term physical developments on tiny planet Earth, which is hanging in big space, being a tiny little thing with a lot of human beings on it. And this is the perspective. If I were then to briefly describe what has happened on this planet recently, I will show you, I'll talk to a couple of developments. And I've included a few positive ones in order to make the presentation a little more balanced than it normally is among people like myself. So one of the things that has happened since I started giving this type of talks is that the world population has gotten very much bigger. This is the red line, and we're still in the same time scale. We are, however, observing a dramatic slowdown in the population growth on the planet Earth, and we will reach a peak. 10 years, 15 years, perhaps 20 years into the future. From when on, we have won the population war, which is one of the most important wars that we have struggled with over the last 50 years. The population will decline. The human footprint on planet Earth will finally stop expanding, at least from the numerical point of view. Why is this happening? It is happening because we have succeeded in another area of the world. We have increased the GDP per person, the economical output per person. The green line has been growing fairly steadily over these 50 years, removing a lot of people from abject poverty into relatively acceptable levels of consumption. And this thing is actually going to continue. One of the, luckily, solid causal relationships between economic income and number of children has governed the red line. The richer you get, the fewer children you get. And that's a correlation. It's actually a causal relation. It's not a correlation. When people can afford a decent life and can afford decent health, they choose to have much fewer children, also in order to be in a position to do something else than raising children, which is not the prime purpose of life, at least in my view. So this is the situation. We have won the population war, and we have removed very much poverty on the surface of the earth, not only thanks to the Chinese, but to a large extent, because they have lifted the 1.4 billion Chinese out of poverty during this period. The side effect, the total GDP of the world is now, of the order of 2.5, perhaps 3 times as big as it was when I started giving these talks. And it will probably become another twice, the current level before the end of the population growth period. And once the population starts to go down, then of course the production output per person is going to increase tremendously, because the amount of capital behind each workplace will be higher. So these are the positive news. The sad fact is, of course, that the increased population and the increased output, the production per person, has effects. And the main driver of this development is, of course, the energy. It is energy that produces things. It is not capital. It is the fact that we are now using a huge amount of kilowatt hours or tons of oil equivalent per person per year. That's the basis for our material wealth, which in turn is the basis for the decline in the population growth rate, which in turn is the reason why the population is about to reach a peak and start declining all over the world. Of course, with 100 years of lag between the leading Japan, etc., and the final end when we manage to develop acceptable material standards all over the world. The energy use has been growing tremendously over the last 50 years. It's the orange line. The interesting thing is that we are about to reach a peak in the physical energy use because of the ongoing shift from fossil fuels to renewable energy, which is increasing the energy efficiency tremendously. So we are about at the end of this dramatic increase in the physical aspects of wealth creation. So you see that over the next 30 years or so, we will produce a lot of energy, but it will not be increasing. It will actually be stable in total use because the productivity in the use of energy will increase. And then finally, in another generation or so, we will finally be at a stage where we do not need to replace all the solar panels and all the windmills that we have built, and we can gradually start to operate a world which is less infested with human beings and power stations. The most important thing that is going to happen during the next period is the continuation of the shift from fossil-based energy to what we often call renewable, because it's easier to say, but it is actually CO2-free energy, which is the important thing. It's hydro, it's nuclear, it's wind, it's sun, it's energy efficiency, it's carbon capture and storage, all these things that do not emit CO2. And gradually, you see the greenhouse gas emissions, they will peak, interestingly, within a decade or so, and then they will start declining. This is the most likely future, the way I see it. And at the end of the century, we will be polluting the air or the atmosphere much less intensely than we are doing at this point in time. But we will not, in my view, be at zero emissions, certainly not in 2050, which is the current ambition. I think it will be of the order of, like I see here, beyond the year 2100 before we stop emitting CO2. And the effect of this is, of course, the black line, that the main side effect is that the temperature will continue to increase, and it will increase all the way to the end of the century and beyond, unless we do something dramatically. And what is the dramatic thing that needs to be done? It's very simple. It is to stop using coal, oil, and gas. Just shift from the use of coal, oil, and gas to anything else as quickly as possible. And the faster we do, the faster will the greenhouse gas emissions come down. Notice that when greenhouse gas emissions come down to zero, that doesn't mean that the atmospheric concentration, goes to zero. It means that then it no longer stops growing. So the day when we finally stop emitting new CO2, we will be in a situation where there is a certain amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, which will warm the planet indefinitely, at least for the tens of thousands of years before the CO2 is sucked out of the atmosphere into trees and into soil and ultimately into the deep ocean. So those of you who believe, those who seem to believe that if we can reach net zero by 2045, this will in a way remove climate change, are of course not understanding what is going on. That means that at that point in time, after the equilibration period of the huge system, the temperature will then be constant. It will not go back to where it was in 1850, which is the starting point. So this is then essentially what is going on in the physical world. We will reach a peak in the population, we will get richer, we will be using more energy, we will be emitting greenhouse gases that will reach, which will then lead to an increasing concentration in the atmosphere and a rising temperature all the way to the end of the century. The important task here is, of course, to accelerate the shift from coal, oil, and gas into the other energy, because then we could hopefully make the temperature stop a little bit earlier than it otherwise would have done. So this is the mixed picture. We have achieved in 50 years great strides on the economic side and on the population side. We are about to see a turning point in the greenhouse gas emissions side, but the change is going to come so late in the day that the resulting warming will be of the order of 2.5 degrees centigrade before the thing levels off. Then there is one other aspect of this which is worrisome, and that is the ongoing increase in the social tension as a consequence of income inequality. In a totally not material aspect of development, we have the parallel development, which means that I'll now jump. So here are the detail why the different things are going the way I said. But here you have the other aspect. This is the soft aspect of income distribution and wealth distribution, because during this 50-year period, you are also in a situation where income inequality measured as the ratio of how much the small elite, we, make compared to the rest. And you have a situation where the inequity within countries are rising dramatically during this period. There was the post-war period where you managed to distribute the income within nations ever better. And then from roughly 1970s onwards, you see in the numbers in the West particularly, you know, where we do have good numbers for things like this, you can actually see how inequity is rising over the period. And if you look at the wealth inequality, it is of course much worse, where you know, the richest 1% of the world's population control 20% of the wealth, while the poorest 50% of the population controls roughly 2% of the wealth. The disparities are increasing, and in the way we see it in the Earth for All book, you know, basically we're saying that the chance of social collapse in this century is much, much higher than the chance of climate collapse. The climate is certainly going to get worse, and we are certainly not going to reach the UN goals, but we will not, as the some alarmists believe, you know, face a cliff and then suddenly, you know, we will get self-reinforcing climate change within this century. It will come later. It will not come during this period. On the other hand, the explosive nature of the growing inequality in the world is much more worrisome, according to the Earth for All and according to my seasoned view after 50 years. So this, and particularly the wealth inequality, is really a problem. The problem is, of course, in the fact that it will cause social tension and will make it difficult for educated government to do anything, because the main conflict will be between the groups inside the country. And you are, of course, seeing in the United States now the most advanced example of how, you know, tension between societal groups, between the rich and the poor, is actually stopping one of the superpowers of the world to actually be able to do anything anymore. And this is going to spread in the world from the richest downward. I'm from the really richest country in the world, Norway, and we are now at the stage where the right wing, the rich people in Norway, now have a political majority, and they are, just like all other right wing groups, in favor of lower taxes and less transfers and less public services and the whole thing. And so they are now in power. We won this last election, but won the last election, but from next election on, there is no way in a democratic nation like Norway, stinking rich, that you'd have a majority who favors private solutions, private hospitals, private schools, private everything, instead of the solidarity solution, paying taxes into a government that then provides free health and free. And what to do, I don't know. This is, and so I end up basically saying that limits was perhaps wrong, in that, we will get collapse, but we will not get collapse because we live on a finite planet. We will get collapse because of the inequities that are about to develop. We thought in the old days that inequities, when people got richer, they would become more willing to pay tax, more willing to run a solidarity solutions, more willing to support collective solutions to things. It turns out that we were wrong. This is actually not what is happening. When you make societies very rich, they start to turn rightwards, into anti-collective solutions. So this is the mixture of the two challenges as I see them 50 years after limits to growth. We have not run into and will not run into resource crisis, non-renewable resource crisis, which was high on the agenda at that time. We will not run into oil, peak oil, or lack of oil, lack of gas, lack of, the non-renewable resource thing is not what is going to take us. It also appears that we are not going to starve to death. It appears that agricultural productivity has been able to keep pace with the growing population and a limited land mass. Yes, we will get large-scale destruction of the environment, the biodiversity, but the real main problem is climate change. It is the emissions of CO2 from the use of coal, oil, and gas. So it's a pollution scenario if you use the language of the 1972 book, which is the real problem. And new, over the last 20 years, the realization that social constraints may actually be even narrower than the climate constraint, namely that we may run into social collapse before we run into the climate collapse. This is the reason why I am not smiling, so now I need to smile, according to my wife. So we need, in the old days, I would typically say this and say, this is the problem, and it's up to you to solve it. I've learned that you must give hope, so you must indicate, where is the solution, and ideally even provide a solution that you believe in, that I believe in. And this has luckily gotten simpler over the last 15 years because of the advent of China. Because if you were God and looked at my Problematique, version 2020, not Aurelio Peccei's Problematique with a Q and U and E in 1968. It is climate change, it's global warming and rising inequity. Those two things are easily solvable by God and me. Solving the CO2 emissions is simply to spend 2% of the world GDP on building windmills and solar panels and batteries and the distribution system, instead of using those 5% that we're using on defense. We could use 2% and just build and build and build, and in that way manage to get rid of coal, oil, and gas, realistically speaking, by 2060, something like that. That is feasible, and it only costs as I said, of the order of 2% of the GDP throughout this period. So that's not only technically feasible, it might, become politically feasible, but it is not profitable in the short term, and consequently it's very hard to implement. The second challenge, that of rising inequity, it is of course totally trivial to solve, and particularly in a world which looks like this. Large-scale transfers from the small rich elite to the majority, ideally in the provision of free services, so that you don't need to send the money. You basically provide for everyone the free health, the free education, the free transport, the free things, so that it's a totally egalitarian type of system. And this sounded, 50 years ago as something that was doable. So we built the Nordic model, the Nordic social democracies, on the basis that high taxes and then, abundant provision of public services to people. And it worked for a long while, until we now have the third generation of stinking rich Norwegians who don't understand that their well-being is a result of the solidarity of the collective action that has been put in place over the last 60, 80 years in my country, and turning right ways and starting to dismantle the welfare state. And so that's where we are. So these are the two problems. And at once, when I describe them, you are struck by two things. First, it's of course totally trivial. It's very simple, remove coal, oil, and gas and make sure that the lowest part of society has acceptable services available. Totally obvious. It should be totally easy to do. And of course, we know that it is not, and that it is not even getting simpler. It's getting more difficult to do these things. And that turns me to the point that we are now in China. And China is actually a country that has done this. They have decided to solve these problems and installed in their government sufficient power to do this, even though it means a sacrifice in the short term in order to create a strong China in the long run. And they have now been able to keep this system in place for 50 years, without revolution and without, excessive control in order to do so. And so at least there is the possibility of doing this thing. It's not problem-free, but it can be done. This we did not know 30 years ago, that this would prove possible, to do, as I said, double the real GDP per person in 1.4 billion people every decade, 4 decades in a row, which really means that China at this point in time is as rich as Norway was in 1960, and China is now as rich as the United States was in 1950. China is now facing the challenge of introducing the welfare society just the way Norway did in 1960. So they're lagging Norway by 65 years, and we know that the first 30 years of that period is actually going to work very smoothly, as long as they manage, to build the welfare systems fast enough, to counter the effect of a declining income growth during this period. And then the second thing is, of course, that the Chinese are very good at redistributing the income and wealth that arises from this collective effort. They make sure that the rich people really are removed at the proper time, and that the bottom of the society is lifted, as much as possible within the budgetary constraints that they, of course, control. So in my mind, yes, there exists a solution. The problem is, of course, the West, my part of the world, and the rest of the world, which do not describe, like the Chinese way of solving the problem. So in our part of the world, the challenge, the extra challenge, is that, first of all, what needs to be done, this simple replacement of coal, oil, and gas with sun and wind and nuclear and thing, isn't profitable, from the point of view of the investor. And consequently, this shift does not occur as fast as it needs to do. It will occur, as I indicated in the slide, enough that we will have much lower greenhouse gas emissions in the year 2100 and a much warmer world than we would like at the end of the century. And the reason is that it isn't profitable from the point of view of those that hold the wealth, to put the money into the wind and the sun and the other things at the speed which is necessary in order to reach net zero within this century. Yes, we are trying to make it look profitable, for instance, by changing tax rules and by giving stimulus, by establishing carbon pricing. We're doing a lot of things in order to make it look as if this is profitable, so that big money starts to move into this transition. I am among the ones that have worked very hard on that score in order to try to make it, to increase the capital flows into the sun and the wind and things. The problem is that this requires such amounts of subsidies that you do not manage to tax the people enough to pay for the subsidies. So you're running into the problem that if you have a forward-looking government, they want to build floating windmills in the North Sea, which is the most important thing from our point of view. You need subsidies, which makes the headlines of the newspapers every time the issue is up. The parliament votes against the subsidies and the windmills are not built. And that this is the double problem of democratic market economies. What needs to be done is not profitable, and there is not a political majority in favor of the subsidies that would make it look profitable to do these things, which is a real challenge. And how to solve that challenge in the rich world is, in my mind, the prime problem. Because that's where most of the CO2 is emitted, and this is where the economic muscle exists. And we are not able to engineer this huge flow. Yes, I already hear from looking at your faces that, but you had the feeling that this has now solved itself, that the CO2 price system is actually working, that Texas is actually, investing a lot in windmills, compared to the gas, etc. Yes, luckily there is a shift, and the shift is in the right direction. And as you saw from my slides, my forecast, carefully made, and contemplated and controlled with other people who do the same type of thing, is that yes, we will probably reach net zero in 100 years, not in the 35. So then the question, since I have to end on a positive note, so what do you do about this? And this is luckily not the problem of China, which is they have solved this problem in an elegant manner and will get away with this as long as they can continue increasing the material standard of living and the quality of life of Chinese. You will not get a rebellion, and you can use the surplus in order to help the world do the transition. And so they have, of course, done over the last 15 to 20 years, put a lot of public resources into the development of electric cars and batteries and solar panels and the whole thing. And in this way, reduced my depression slightly, because clearly we're now seeing that this is paying off. And if I'm not wrong, we may actually, when my children turns 80, they will probably say that, yes, we made it, and it was the Chinese. Thank you very much.
Thank you, dear Jorgen. We have some time for questions and answers. Please.
And please insult me.
Don't give ideas.
No, but please do, because I'm an old dog,
Jorgen, thank you very much. We have not met in person yet, but your reputation leads miles, years ahead, of course, and I've heard so much about you. So very interested in hearing you speak and also hopefully meeting you in person later. I'm a little bit younger than you, but I also feel over 100 years old. But interestingly, my projections are far more negative than yours, and my sort of graphs don't line up, and my predictions don't line up with yours. I'm far more skeptical, sadly. How can GDP possibly grow when we have an aging population and with automation lying ahead, which will make a lot of people jobless? After every boom comes bust, we simply have to expect that. So I would forecast a huge drop in GDP for many, many reasons: disruptions of supply chains, disruption of the energy, transport, food, fashion, supply chains that lie ahead, simply sheerly because of climate change. I think also that you say GHG emissions you think will be dropping, from what I heard, and C is that we have uncontrollable runaway emissions because carbon sink, so what used to be a carbon sink, a forest or ocean, unfortunately has reached a tipping point. I think Professor Rockström will also now acknowledge that the ocean sadly has reached a tipping point probably already 50 years ago. For some reason we didn't see that coming in that work, but I know that many scientists have been warning about this, and indeed it is now confirmed. I would say that when I look at I don't want you to be depressed though, and I hate the thought of thinking of you being in that space, but I have been in that space myself in the past. And what I say to myself is that the graph, human civilization, we are still a very young species, I think. So when you look at the graphs, you should probably extend that to a few thousand years before, and hopefully also extend it forward if we can. I also want to say that the world is in puberty at the moment. This is how I want to think about it. I might be wrong, of course, but I want to think that we're going through a very stormy period. And of course, what lies ahead is very difficult to predict, and I'm sure I'm wrong as well. We all have to sort of assume that. But that in particular, when we look at climate adaptation, there's a real opportunity there, and I like the fact that I learned that crisis presents both opportunity and challenge in equal measure in Chinese language. I think in China, what we've seen from the presentations, and I've been very grateful with the presentations by the Chinese partners, is that China is facing its own challenges that are rapidly catching up with our own challenges, I think, going forward.
Should I give you a piece
where should I stop, really?
Advice?
Yeah, Bianca, good question.
This is it. So you can see there's I think there will be a lot more space, and I hope that we will have another good 20 years, quite frankly, to work on this and to develop this, because I think the work's not done yet. I think you play a very important role with the work that you have done in the past and going forward.
But didn't you start by saying that you are much more pessimistic than I?
Yes.
Yes.
Much more. I mean, for example, the unmitigated burning of coal. We haven't touched on that.
So let's just... So here is a representative of Jorgen in 1990, which is really depressed. you know, who do not think that man will rise to the occasion and respond. And I, you know, partly agree with you, but on the other hand, you know, one of the many things I've done during these years was to look at the climate models, to look at the self-reinforcing climate change. We spent 3 years building our own models of the climate system. It's published, you know, it's a whole thing. Our clear conclusion is that Rockström is wrong. My dear friend, you know, co-author of this thing, he is wrong. Yes, we live in a situation where we might get runaway climate change, but it will not occur in this century. This is a phenomenon that will occur over the next several hundred to several thousand years. The reason why they are willing to say what they're saying is that they are not using dynamic models, they're using comparative statics, and for those of you who understand what those words mean, is that they have no clue about the transition period for, you know, jumping from one of the equilibria to the other equilibrium. And that's the basic thing. The whole industry is based on one assumption, which is not true. You know, this is a dynamic system which is evolving over time on time scales that are determined by the physical processes that are in the system. I chose this one just to give hope to the rest of you. I could then take each of your pessimism and say which ones are the correct one and which ones are the ones that I have stopped worrying about. So have hope, work for the solution that you believe in.
Many thanks. We have a question there and a second. Let's take the two questions maybe. The gentleman from Singapore, no? And then we.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation, and it is a genuine honor to see you there. Like, we teach our students about your work in class, and it's magnificent. The last few days have reminded me about who's not in the room. All right, we've talked about a lot of vulnerable groups not being here, but I think there is another group that's the opposite end of the vulnerable groups, which is the 1%, the true elites. And when I say, I mentioned the name Bezos before, but that level, because they appear to have a phenomenal amount of influence across all the problems we've talked about, including this morning's one about science and technology. Scientists can write memorandums, they can publish reports saying we shouldn't do this, and the uber rich just say, well, there's no benefit to me to do that. And I guess my question to you is, one thing you said is that you reminded me that it's not impossible to see the rich change their frame. I think you reminded me about the Rockefellers and the other robber barons over 120 years ago who, I don't know the full history, but somehow they marked the dawn, they marked a peak of inequality, yet immediately following that, something happened and it dawned a phenomenal level of labor rights transformations. And I guess my question to you would be, do you see that still being possible today? And what do we need to figure out to do that? That's my question.
Very good question. And luckily, my answer is yes, it is fully possible to do this as long as you do it in a society which is not so rich that there is a majority, politically speaking, who are in favor of the stinking rich. So the way we have chosen, we have written a book called Tax the Rich, you know, which is the obvious solution. You just tax the rich and use the money to build windmills and solar panels. You don't use the money to redistribute, you just make it directly into building. And one way, and this is of course fiercely opposed by the rich, you know, because they want to invest their money where the return is the highest, and they feel the reality, namely that the windmills and the solar panels is a hoax. From that point of view, that you use artificial calculation in order to try to indicate that the lifetime cost of energy is actually lower, but that's on a 30-year horizon. Those guys don't care a shit, you know, as long as the return on investment starts to be below 10% a year. So the golden bullet is the following. Society, the democratic majority, who are not poor, pass a law which says that the rich do not need to give the money to the state or build someone else's windmills. They are obliged to spend 3% of their wealth every year investing in solar panels in the third world. Just to build them, and they can own them if that is okay, but they're not allowed to rent them to someone. They just own them, and then 70 years down the line, hopefully there would be some residual value that their grandchildren could take. But this idea of taxing the rich, earmarked, to build solar panels, standalone for the poorest people of the world, is actually one thing even a few stinking rich Norwegians might be in favor of. In a poor country, I assume that it ought to be possible to get a political majority in favor of a thing like this. In my country, no way. But here you have the type of thing that could actually help dramatically. And of course, I've been called to the meetings of the stinking rich when they try to decide what they can do through their foundations, etc. I always propose this type of thing, and they are totally uninterested. Which is very depressing, but a reality. So you need a democratic society which controls the rich. And those are very few democratic societies in order to put in place this totally obvious solution.
Many thanks, Jorgen, for these. Please an applause. I'm very sorry. There are several hands asking for time, but we have no time left. But don't move yet, because we have relax, Jorgen. But we have something for you, because our communications team, our dear Philippa Baumgartner, who is there, they have prepared a video which I think will resonate with you. So, would we show the video, please?
Jorgen Randers. I have spent years of my life trying to convince the Western societies to try to take into account the long-term consequences of short-term growth decisions. And I have failed.
When we approach the limits of the Earth, we will not basically move towards those limits and then smoothly fit in the world population and activity under the carrying capacity of the planet. We will, because of decision delays, shoot through the sustainable level and then move into unsustainable territory. Economists who were the forerunners of 30 years or 40 years of criticism of limits to growth. It's continuing to this day. Most classical macroeconomists thinks this is a piece of shit.
Still totally relevant. 2052. It was written in 2011, a book that describes what will happen to the world during the next 40 years when the world does not listen to my advice.
The UN, in its endless wisdom, has decided that this requires the satisfaction of 17 Sustainable Development Goals with 197 targets. And then Johan comes and he says that not only do we have to address this huge number of different goals, we have to do it within 9 planetary boundaries. So 9 times 197, that gives like 1,700 things. So in sum, these are the 3 things I think we should focus on. Poverty, climate, and inequity. All these things, and we are successful, we might really achieve my dream, which is
a dream of 4 billion lively, sustainable people on this small planet of ours in the year 2100. Thank you.
So this is a modest tribute, and we have something else for you. And so I would ask our dear co-president, Silvia Zimmermann, Paul Srivastava, to come to the stage. Also, Professor Lowe, if you wish to come, and Yiheng, please, we will give you something, well, a detail, a tribute to you, you know, something for you to bring home. Please, Philippa. No, come on. Well, this is just a small compilation of photographs of you. Thank
you very, very much.
It's a tribute to all of the Club of Rome to you, dear friend. Well, yes.
So, thank you. This is a huge surprise. I had not even.
We kept in secrecy.
Yes, and you have successfully done so. So I'm very surprised. I am actually not used to being celebrated, which is really, you know, my enemies are much more numerous than my friends. So I certainly appreciate this a lot. So thank you.
Much welcome. Much welcome. So with this, we end the first part of this closing session. You can go back to the end, but not you, because I will handle the mic to my friend Yiheng, who will moderate the rest of the session, and we start. Oh, sorry, Silvia, you should not go back because we start with your keynote. Please.
Is that firstly the video show? Yeah? First the video show. So wait, just wait a couple of seconds, yes. So let me introduce the following video keynote speaker. That is Siddharth Chatterjee. He is a so-called United Nations resident coordinator in China since 2021, and is designated representative, reports to the UN General Secretary General. He represents later on also quite a number of occasions, and also involved in the United States Red Cross movement. He served during also the fragile and war-torn countries all over the world. Wow, that's a tremendous experience. And 3 times TEDx speaker. That's not easy. Right. So I think quite a number of other things. He holds his master's degree in the public policy from Princeton University in the United States. So let's hear what he talks and not what he has been. Thank you.
Esteemed scholars and intellectuals, distinguished business leaders, ladies and gentlemen, greetings. Let me begin by thanking our hosts for convening this vital gathering. It is an honor to join you virtually and to share in this rich dialogue, uniting knowledge, experience, and leadership from across the globe in pursuit of a more sustainable and peaceful tomorrow. Over the past days, we have confronted the profound realities of our time. Climate change, ecosystem degradation, and deepening inequalities continue to challenge the resilience of our societies and the health of our planet. These challenges span the globe, yet their impacts are profoundly uneven. Meeting them demands shared resolve, inclusive cooperation, and the courage to draw strength from our diversity. This conference has reaffirmed that pathways to ecological civilizations are neither uniform nor generic. They are deeply shared by context, culture, geography, and history, and yet we see encouraging transitions underway. In many places, the local innovation in clean energy, regenerative agriculture, and circular economies are creating new models of well-being, models that restore both people and nature. We have witnessed how science and technology can be fused with traditional knowledge and community leadership to yield solutions that are both grounded and scalable, from resilient infrastructure adopted to local circumstances to youth-led climate action in urban communities. These examples reveal what is possible through cross-sectoral and interdisciplinary cooperation. Such diversity of approaches strengthens the legitimacy and vitality of international cooperation. It opens up the space for deeper trust, richer dialogue, and creative partnerships rooted in the realities on the ground. As Secretary General Antonio Guterres reminds us, and I quote, "Making peace with nature is the defining task of the 21st century. It must be the top priority for everyone, everywhere." End of quote. Through exchange and collaboration, we build a shared foundation from which different parts can converge towards common goals. Looking forward, the insights gathered here point us towards clear priorities. First, sustained investment in people, places, and technologies that nurture ecological renewal. Second, inclusive policy frameworks that recognize the agency of youth, indigenous people, and women across the sectors, placing them at the heart of solutions design. Third, support the local innovation matched by global solidarity so that breakthroughs emerging on the ground can scale and inspire others. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, this pursuit of peaceful ecological civilization stands amongst the most consequential endeavors of our age. It demands humility in our learning, persistence in our actions, solidarity in our commitments. It invites us to trust each other across divides, to listen deeply, and to act boldly, not only for our own communities, but for the entire web of life in which we depend. With the spirit of collaboration and commitment exemplified in this gathering, we continue this journey with clarity, renewed resolve, and a shared sense of responsibility. Let us go forward together, forging plural pathways towards a reconciled relationship between humanity and the earth, and in doing so, advancing global partnerships that sustain both planet and people. Thank you very much. 谢谢.
Wonderful. Okay, the next one will be Silvia to give us a keynote speaking. And you all know Silvia through the last couple of days. To me, that's really a very interesting personality in science-based Club of Rome in the past. And now we have someone with philosophical background and also with arts understanding, poet. So every time I listen to her, it's just listening to a poem. So please welcome to, let me welcome Silvia to give us another poem.
Well, okay, thank you. Well, finally, we're here. Philosophy and poetry left to the conclusion, to the end of this extraordinary meeting. And, well, actually, I think we must take into account this philosophy and poetry, because what is proposed by the Shanghai University of Engineering Science is towards an ecological civilization through plural pathways. So we need them all for this reconciliation between Earth and humanity. And if we think about the word ecological, where does it come from? What is the root of ecological? It comes from Greek. Ekos comes from eikos, home, the house. So ecology means the taking care of our house. We women, here we've heard Siddhartha Chatterjee talking about women, and we know a lot traditionally about taking care of our house, of our home. We traditionally look after children, look after our plants so that we have flowers in our windows, look after food, we nurture our family, we clean our house, we take care of the objects that are in our house, we take care of our pets. So basically, what is it to be ecological? It is a question of love. And we know quite a lot, women, about this. We love our family. We love our house. Actually, I am longing for my house. And this is something that is not minor. We have been talking a lot and magnificently about artificial intelligence, about new technologies, all the most miracles that they are doing in this marvelous China. But let me tell you something. And this is actually a scientific that said so. I'm talking about von Neumann. He is the father of computer, the father of all this that we are having today as granted. He was the father. And he said something very important to take into account today. He said, there is no cure for progress. So there is no cure. I mean, artificial intelligence is here to stay. But he said something more. But what we will need someday is an antidote to the excess of rationality. So, what does it mean? We are rational animals because we are, and there I come, we are rational. And we are extraordinarily rational. And we are doing all this progress that is going on and that is unpredictable. Where is it leading us? But we continue to have another dimension. We are not just rational, we have an emotional also intelligence. We are emotional human beings. And this is something that must not be neglected if we really want a reconciliation, Earth, humanity. What does it mean, humanity? There was a philosopher that I've studied quite deeply in my young years. He was Ernst Schleiermacher, and he studied specifically the human condition. And he said something very interesting. He said, the human being actually is a being at the first time. It is a species. He is an animal being with a very special condition. Human being is in the middle of the beast and the human. He's not still human. There is the potential of being human, but he can become a beast. So we can become more than beasts, we can become brutal beasts. And this is very easy. Just let us go. But the other tendency is quite much more difficult. To be human being needs work, needs effort, needs endeavor. It is very difficult to become human beings. And this is the challenge. This is the challenge. We can be brutal, we can hate, we can have greed, we can exploit, we can destruct, but we can also be human beings. We can construct, we can restore, we can regenerate, we can even come to love each other. This is our challenge as humanity, to reconcile among ourselves so that we are then able to reconcile with Earth. Well, and about the pathways, I'll be very short. I want to talk about my teacher, a great writer. He was Argentine, but universal. Jorge Luis Borges. And let me tell you that most of the scientists read Jorge Luis Borges and is an inspiration. Actually, Ilya Prigozhin, Nobel Prize in Chemistry, he has been a close friend to mine, the father of the theory of chaos, he told me, and he told many others, that his inspiration has been Jorge Luis Borges. Literature. And let me just mention one of his narratives that I admire so much, The Garden of the Forking Paths. In that story, it appears a character, the protagonist, is a Chinese. He is a Chinese that has to attain somebody else to give a message, a message in the Second World War. And this protagonist had an ancestor that was a genius who had created a labyrinth. Then what happened? The labyrinth. He must find the way to reach the person to whom he must deliver the message, the secret message. He chooses the paths to arrive to that person, and well, then you'll know if you read the narrative, you'll need the end. Well, what does it say in that story? That actually there are many futures that can be possible, and it depends on the pathway that we choose, that it will happen what it will happen, and we'll be choosing one future among thousands, about infinite futures. Jorge Luis Borges anticipated in 16 years the quantum physics. He wrote this story, literature, poetry, literature, in 1941. And it was in 1957 that Hugh Everett spoke about the quantum physics, in which every particle is simultaneously in different places. And we can see that particle, electron, photon, in just one space and in one locality when it is observed. It is the observer that marks the location of that particle. So, there are many possibilities of worlds in the quantum world. Everett speaks about the observer. Borges spoke about the chooser. We choose. And we can even change if we have mistaken our choice. We are able to do that. That is what is expressed in that narrative. What do I want to meet with this, to say with this? That we are co-creators of our future. It depends on our choice, which is the present choice for the future that we can develop. This is something that has always shocked me a lot. So I am hopeful because there is not just one possibility and the time is not linear. There are many times that we can build. So I think, and I don't want to go further, I think that with this encounter, in this meeting in Shanghai and here, we have made a choice. And it is because of this choice that we are able to construct the world. It was Borges who said, well, it is possible that the world exists by itself, but I'll be very surprised. We are the creators of the world. And we can create a brutal world, or we can create an ecological civilization in which we take care of our home and of our own lives. And just to end this pre-closing, well, there is a song of an Argentinian composer that was written in a very difficult time in my country, that it was in the middle of dictatorship. And she composed and wrote a marvelous song that its title is To Honor Life. Because we are talking about life all the time. Technology, AI, everything, it is life that we are trying to preserve. And what Eladia Vasquez, this is her name, says is, there is a great difference between living and honoring life. We can live like beasts. We can kill, we can make war, we can hate each other, we can exploit. But if we honor life, that's a different thing. We have to honor this mystery, finally, the labyrinth Borges talks about is this mystery in which we are all caught. We cannot escape of this mystery of life. We cannot escape this labyrinth of infinite paths, and we have to choose. So, finally, in this occasion, I want to thank the Shanghai University of Engineering Science for this occasion, and to each one of you, and to all together, because we have made a choice. And by making a choice, we have decided to celebrate humanity. And by celebrating humanity, we are honoring life. Thank you. Thank you.
Please.
Thank you. Yeah?
Yeah, you can sit.
Yeah.
Maybe just one sentence to the quantum effect. To be conscious, you need not to be observer to be conscious. Then you are already influencing the whole path. That's what the conclusion. I'm supposed to introduce every panelist now. Joanna, you have actually quite a long CV. I will just pick up maybe the most important, I think. Established a global existence security threats board and a global future platform for planet, people, and peace. Let's cover everything. Pampilla, she's our former co-president, a mother, a grandmother, and a colleague. She used to be fighting for South Africa, the free South Africa, and today I think she's fighting for a unified Africa. And Ubuntu and MAT, if I'm right. Yeah. And last one, but not least, of course, our president, co-president, Paul. People might think that he is only from the university, but don't forget, he's in the university and managing a huge sum of money. So he's a big manager. So let's welcome all our panelists. So our topic here today is international cooperation in pluralistic society. So I have to come back a bit for myself, the experience. In 1974, I went to Germany and studied. And for the first time, I read an article in Time magazine. And the topic and the title was The Futurist. Who was that? Exactly that article was describing Club of Rome. And that comic painted there in the magazine was a gypsy lady looking into a glass ball. So since then, I was so inspired, and I think I am going to Germany and study my chemical engineering. I will become a futurist. 1974. At last, I became one of the members in 2013. Long path, but I have to say, with hope. So it's a journey of hope. As a chemical engineer, I worked in a multinational company, and I introduced the responsible care into Singapore and later on in China, and it always with hope. So I don't believe what the pessimistic said. Even Jorgen, you are a little bit showing your smiles, but I only look at your smiles, nothing else. And to Chinese, although I'm coming from Taiwan, I'm still Chinese. There is a struggle in us I believe that it should be also in other part of the world. Always the Chinese culture was adopting or accepting or merging or integrating the cultures from the other one. That was since 2,000 years or even longer. But in the last 200 years, Chinese have been trying modernization or westernization for long. Actually, I should have Professor Low in this panelist, but he selected to give a last remark or closing. Okay, we arrange. In actual fact, the intellectual of Chinese have a deep struggle. Because on the one hand, we are learning, and just as I used to be, and 45, 50 years ago, went to Germany and studied chemical engineering. We try to learn the best or state-of-the-art technologies. On the other hand, we have a tradition for 5,000 years, and we have all our rules, Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism. So that struggle remains. On the one hand, we're talking about economy and wealth. On the other hand, we're talking about serving our people, our countrymen. So that kind of struggle is within any individual, or let's say intellectual, not only in China. I think those countries in developing or even later comer, that's including South America, that's including Africa. I think all these intellectuals have the same thing. And today we're talking about the cooperation. So this is also, I start to ask you to address one sentence or more sentences, or even you can have a short talk on that, whether you are also facing that kind of struggle for international cooperation. Yeah, is that okay, that topic? And you can think about that and give what you think. Give us your talk. Thank you.
So thank you. There's plenty to reflect upon, I think, over these last days. And I think one of the things that I just want to pick up on is that we collectively are, as humanity, we're walking through the forest of life. We don't really know where we're going. Sometimes it's quite a thicket. And we don't really quite know how we're going to get to where we want to get to, and we don't really know what the vision is going to be, what we actually want to create. We're a bit lost as humanity, and I think some of the other reflections is that we're deeply traumatized as humans. We have many scars, and we're traveling with many injuries and scars with us. So how do we get to the future? And we can see this is being played out, if we look at the topic, in terms of international cooperation. Globally, we've reached many, many challenges. We're at a different point in humanity where countries can no longer come together. We're a very divided species. But we're here today from different parts of the world, with a common goal and common agendas. And that's the importance of these sorts of groupings. Because actually, if we have a common purpose and a common goal and a common vision, we can overcome our past traumas. We can develop a vision for the future. We can identify hazards together of those multiple pathways, and we can collectively choose a pathway to a future that is flourishing and that creates ecological well-being. I'll stop there for the moment.
Thank you, thank you. Wonderful opening. Mandela?
Mine is simply to express my gratitude to all of my colleagues at the Club of Rome, our partners here in China, and all the people who have made this conference a success. Jorgen, your role as a voice, and you felt most times that you were a voice in the wilderness, we're listening. And I want to say to you that I live in hope because I believe that if we put our trust and support to young people, even if they live in the US or in your country, everywhere, but on the African continent, there is no future in Africa other than through what I'm pleased to report, the bravery, the creativity, the energy of those young people. You just have to look at Mamdani. He has shown that even in a country that has lost its way, if young people come together with clarity of vision of the future they want to build, and it's not one path, there are plural paths. We have to respect pluriversality. Mamdani has shown that you can mobilize people who feel there is no future. My continent is a continent of infinite possibilities. And Christopher, in his presentation earlier on energy, we are the richest continent on the planet in terms of the assets that we can bring to this big challenge. But what we have to do is to learn also from your country, China, that we've got to return to who we are. Leverage our rich heritage that tells us that we are interconnected, interdependent within the web of life. So it's not that we must find a new beginning. No, we must return to the source of our essence. And Mamdani has leveraged that essence. And look at him. And my job now is to make sure every young person, wherever they are, they just have to know that the future can be shaped if we work together. And thanks to the Chinese government for creating the space for us. And of course, Professor Low and his work with his colleagues has made it possible for us to drink from this well of hope. There are no limits to hope. Thank you.
Thank you. So I still remember when I first met Mandela, I have to say that, in 2013, in our meeting in Canada. And when she saw me, and she immediately asked, what can China help Africa? But I think that is a very modest word, help. I think what she means and what I have later on, what I have learned actually more from Africa is go back to your roots. And that from that day on, or since 2013, I'm engaged in the East and West culture transfer, culture integration. And thank you very much for that hint. And thank you very much also to offer the youth and that up to you, to everyone. I think I'm still young. Even I'm 70. Thank you. Next, of course, we would like to have our co-president, Paul, to have some words.
Okay, so this is the toughest job I've ever done. It's the end of 3 days of talking. All the ideas are out there with you, and I'm supposed to talk after Mampela. That's impossible. So instead of competing, I'm going to follow her lead. I want to begin by thanking, of course, all of you that are present here, particularly Professor Lowe and Shanghai University of Engineering Sciences, and all our other partners, the World Academy of Arts and Sciences, the UNESCO Bridges Program, and all my colleagues within the Club of Rome for making these 3 days happen. They've been very educational for me. I have pages and pages of notes that I'm going to be looking at and continuing this conference. And I would urge all of you that while we have taken an enormous amount of time to open a space for conversation, we don't want you to close it at the end of this hour. We hope that you'll keep that space open and continue to write to us and communicate with us and collaborate with us. And that's an invitation to everybody in this room and everybody who's listening online. The purpose of this conference is to start something. We're not finishing it now. I also want to respond to Jorgen, because he's been such an influence, not only in my life, but in the life of a lot of people over here. And I want to say that I have to disagree with his sources of depression. I think everything that I hear from Jorgen gives me hope. And let me explain why. I think we are at a time in human history when we have the most amount of knowledge than any other human time. We have the most amount of money, finances, and material resources than we have ever had in the past. And we are all addicted. We are all addicted as human beings. If there's one thing that defines humanity, it's not rationality, it's addiction. And what are we addicted to? We are addicted to cooperation. That is how we have come this far. We have not come this far because of competition. We have not come this far because of individualism. We have come this far as a community. So I don't see the 9 billion as a problem. It is the cooperation that has made that possible. So I have a huge amount of hope that going forward, we can solve this problem. The problem is big, but we can solve this problem through cooperation. And for the first time in human history, we actually got signatures of 192 nations to agree that there are 17 sustainable development goals. I mean, here is a group of a species that has fought with each other and created all kinds of problems and conflicts, but it is coming together. So I see the future in hopeful terms, but it's not going to be for free. It's not going to happen automatically. It's going to have to be intentional. It's going to have to be deliberate. And this is the work that we at the Club of Rome are cut out for. We have always been systems thinkers. That is what has been in our DNA. We have come to realize in this conference that Earth, humanity, reconciliation is a systems challenge. So let us all work together. Let's all cooperate with people in this room and those who are listening, and with the world to make it happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. Wonderful speech, and if I'm an investor, I will just give you my money. Silvia, do you?
Well, thank you. Well, we are all on the same page because to cooperate means to respect and to admire our diversity. It is not true that we do not love the different. The truth is that we love each other in our differences. And when we meet, we want to meet the different to me that is sharing humanity. That is possible cooperation. I love coming here, and we love coming here to know Chinese in their specificity. And that does not mean, that is important, to keep identity. But to keep identity does not mean to be isolated. I come from Argentina, I'm from a continent that is very used to openness. We are Latin Americans, but we are open to the world because we are curious. We are fascinated by the diverse to me. What can I learn from him? So I really think that cooperation is possible, and that we can come to, because also it is possible because we are sharing a goal. There is a difference between optimism and hope. Optimism may be empty. Hope is always rooted on the possibilities, on the knowledge, and in the clear goal that we are pursuing.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this nice wording. So how much time do we have for the... but you have the closing mark. We don't? Yeah? Okay, good. So thanks again, all the panelists. So we can... Don't move. Okay, just last... Okay. You go ahead.
Thank you so much. And Jorgen, I would suggest that you will sit as well. Because we will, at the very end, we will ask everybody to come on the stage to take a beautiful picture. So don't move. Also, because we have further concluding remarks, we have proposed to Professor Lowe to give us a special address. And are you ready, my friend? Please.
I don't have slides, so you can see as it is. Yeah. But I do have a... Ladies and gentlemen, friends, 2 days ago, we began a global conversation on two mountains and Earth-humanity reconciliation. Today, we are about to bring this great event to a successful close. But I want to say this is not an end. It's a brand new beginning, the start of closer international collaboration. Looking back over half a century, from the Club of Rome's The Limits to Growth in 1972 until today, the reports warning about the danger of a conflict between unlimited growth and the limited planet remains not only valid, but even more urgent now. In tackling the limits crisis facing humanity, China has been making active efforts in key areas such as renewable energy, carbon emissions, forest expansion, biodiversity, electronic vehicles, and green technology innovation. To name a few specifics, and all based on the latest available reports from Western medias. China ranked #1 globally in total installed renewable energy capacity. That's from IRENA 2024. China ranked first in global energy transition investment. That's from Bloomberg NEF 2024. And in per capita CO2 emission, China ranks around 40, higher than the global average, but lower than major developed economies. That's from Global Carbon Project. Over the past decade, China has consistently ranked first in the net forest growth area. That's from UNFAO and it ranks second in the Nature Index of biodiversity-related research output after US. That's all definitely from Nature. And China is the first in global EV sales and the stocks from IEA 2024, and it ranked first in granted invention patents for green low-carbon technology over the past 5 years from WEPO. And according to the CNISA report, China also ranked first globally in the higher quality development index rating system. Actually, these are some examples. Through its own effort, China is trying to achieve prosperity and fairness within planetary boundaries. And we all know sustainable development is not any single country's task, and it requires real efforts from every nation, and more importantly, global cooperation and the plural pathways. All cooperation begins with communication. Just as most of the most miserable relationship of a human being, it's often start when communication stops. So in this sense, host this Club of Rome conference in China is a great and historic step forward. You not only see China's latest development and learn what the Chinese people are thinking and doing with your own eyes. More importantly, I believe that from today on, when you imagine a possible future, probably you will include your Chinese impression and experience intentionally or unintentionally. Here, I'd also like to respond to Professor Ranker's remarks about whether the Earth is warming or cooling. First, all views are welcome, but we should think critically before accepting it. This isn't the first time I've heard this argument, but to me, more important than the scientific debate is the question behind: what action should humanity take? What should we live? If we look at those who are supporting the global warming perspective, who are these people? Almost all of them are those who advocate what we should respect nature, live in harmony with, take more responsibility for our environment impact, and actively restore the environment, clean the air and water, restore soil, combat desertification, plant more trees, reduce waste, increase biodiversity, develop new energy, and enrich a more than human world. They support long-term thinking and a frugal lifestyle. On the other hand, among those who deny that the human activity caused the current environment crisis, many are unwilling to take these responsibilities. So, as a science enthusiast, I will keep following the research with great interest. But when it comes to what action we should take, my attitude is super clear. Humanity must take action quickly. As an old Chinese saying goes, better to believe it exists than not. And more than that, these actions align with the virtues upheld not only by Chinese civilization, but by most culture worldwide. That's my view. Finally, as I said in my speech on the first day, and we need action. We do need to respect the legacy of the founder of the Club of Rome, Mr. Aurelio Pezzelli, a man of action, reflection, and science. Here are two proposals for future collaborations. First, I hope you will join the transformation of Shanghai University of Engineering Science I'm now leading. Some of you visited Suez. I saw the beautiful picture. Ms. Wang Qing sent me the picture, group picture, in front of our library, right? Maybe you still remember the library. Do you remember the shape of library? Yeah, it's outline of two mountains. Suez is on the way, becoming a new, sustainable-oriented university. We're going to reform every aspect of the university, from the ways of teaching, the ways of learning, the curriculum, to research, to innovation, transformation, and international collaborations. I really hope your wisdom will enrich this transformation. Thank you. Second, actually, I'm planning to launch 1 to 2 future innovation living labs in Songjiang and Suzhou. Ethan, I don't know that if you still remember the name of the laboratory. Yeah, so that's a laboratory I set up at Tongji University 15 years ago. So actually, Professor Ethan Chen, and he was named as the director of the lab. But due to many reasons, an in-house lab, a lab inside of a building, I think it's not enough. Now we really need to think about how can we create the lab, at least at the scale of a village, or even a town, or a city. So I really hope, I really hope that this group of people, committed people, and we can start a global crowdfunding and co-creation process, putting in all of our ideas for sustainable future into practice. Action speaks louder than words, and we need a real community-driven demonstration project that can be evaluated and communicate and can be improved over time. Ecological civilization is essential, a global local movement from competitive growth to collaborative civilization. And international collaboration in higher education is key to breaking down knowledge, culture, and community barriers in ecological governance. As the president of Suez, I hope to use my university as a platform to deepen academic, business innovation, and cultural collaboration between China and the rest of the world in fields like circular economy, new energy, low carbon transportation, environmental management, and sustainable design. Many paths, one destination. Let's start from Suzhou, carrying a shared vision, a sense of duty, an optimistic attitude. I still believe that we need to be optimistic, and we have to be optimistic. We have a dinner behind, right? Dinner ahead of us, and to continue our journey of creating a richer, fair, more harmonious economic civilization through plural pathways. Not only the people already on the same page, but also the people on other pages. That's very important. Finally, as the organizer from Shanghai and Suzhou, I propose we give the warmest applause to thank Carlos, Yihen Chen, Qing Wang, and the outstanding work of the Club Rome, Suez, and the Suzhou teams they present. Without their efforts, our conference would not have been so successful. Thank you. I look forward to seeing you again.
So please, let's bring here the teams. Philippa, Rad, Robinan, please come here. Nolita, please, the people. Thank you, Professor Lowe, for pointing that without them we wouldn't have the... And also, I would ask Madam Wang and for you to call your team to the stage, because we have actually something for you, for the team. So please go onto the stage, and I think Robin Ann will give the presents. Yep. No. Okay. Please, Robin Ann, proceed. I mean, it's a very modest response to your incredible hospitality and for all the efforts you have been doing. We have, I think, for more people of your team.
So I have to say some words for Robin. Robin, please stay. It's marvelous that she has learned all the Chinese names within a short time and run through the whole list. When I say this name, she said, this is here, that is here. My God. Wonderful.
And now, as this is a tradition in the conferences of the Club of Rome, I would ask all of you to come to the stage, for a collective picture, please. I mean, that will be a beautiful memory of these days. Maybe, I mean, yes, maybe. That's a good idea. That's a good idea. Sitting here. Yes, please. Sorry, just a second of your attention for the people who will go to Ditching and Morganshan. This will be tomorrow. The bus will leave at 9 a.m. from the hotel, so please be in the lobby at 8:30 or definitely we will get out at 9. We are still missing one translation receiver, and we need